Hi, I'm Vanessa and I love bad Star Trek. I will be the stride of pride that is Star Trek's Next Generation. Today, I will be talking to you about an episode called The Price. One of the most sexist things the Next Generation has ever done, besides the child. And like the child, the sexism is once again directed mostly at Deanna Troi, but also somewhat at Chief Medical Officer Dr. Beverly Crusher in one of the most mind-blowing failures of the Bechdel test that has ever been caught on film, in my opinion. But certainly for Star Trek. If you're unfamiliar with the Bechdel test, colloquially known as how feminist a piece of narrative art is, to me, it's not so much a measure of feminism at all. It honestly doesn't even start there. So much as ask the question, does this piece of art acknowledge that women are people? For example, if two named women characters are in a room without men in it, do they have a discussion? And if they are talking, does the conversation give any regard to anything other than men or the pursuit of heterosexual romance? Or are the women just romantic interests for the dudes? The scene in question is hysterically off the mark in that regard. And that is very unfortunate because in a different scene, there is a real and valuable question brought up that cuts to the core of Troi's function on the Enterprise. Why is she on the bridge? And is it ethical that she gives Picard information that he wouldn't otherwise have to gain an advantage? Sadly, the person bringing it up is absolute Sigma male trash. So it's difficult to hear what he says and not perceive it as anything other than yet another tool of manipulation. One that anyone who has experience as a woman dating cis men would sadly be familiar with. The bad guys in the episode are intended to be the Ferengi, but remember, they're the Next Generation episode 1, so they're the anti-Semitic sniveling con artists. But goddamn, if they didn't have Raul, one of the creepiest fuckboys in sci-fi, playing Troi's emotions like a piano all the while. In what greasy nastiness that they crammed in as a B-plot. Every summary of this episode that I could find doesn't seem to notice how much of a scumbag this guy was. So his manipulative tactics go undetected by both the writers and the characters on the show. So rather than using the B-plot to reveal anything about Troi, the writers have instead revealed what little they know or want to know about women and normalize some extremely shitty behavior and inadvertently make a statement about what a man can do with power and what limited options women have with that same ability. The episode starts out reminding us of the one thing the writers know about Troi, that she likes chocolate.
And computer, I would like a real chocolate sundae. I would like real chocolate ice cream, real whipped cream.
This unit is programmed to provide sources of acceptable nutritional value.
Who doesn't like chocolate? It's like the writers read one Kathy comic and were like, we're done, get it, we get it. But food preferences aren't actually a personality trait, unless you're Hannibal Lecter. I see why it'd be frustrating to not get the full fat chocolate from the replicator, but maybe she could take comfort in the fact that cannibals can eat without ripping their food off a living person. She could understand that as a counselor, right? We get another ridiculous stereotype checked off because Picard invites her over the intercom to a gathering in 10 Forward, and she's like, but I have nothing to wear, and Picard goes, oh, just throw any old thing on, painting women as high maintenance. So frankly, this doesn't say much to me about Counselor Troi. Some women do enjoy chocolate on occasion and like dressing up, so I'm not knocking that. But after about the 50th chocolate addict who is persnickety about her appearance, you start to wonder, You know? Have these folks ever met a woman before? Anyway, she has to tend forward where we learn that the Enterprise is acting host to a negotiation to the first and only stable wormhole in the Alpha Quadrant that would lead to the Gamma Quadrant. And it's currently owned by the Barzon. And the woman who is there to represent them is wearing some sort of horse bit. And there's some other dignitaries who are there to negotiate. And there's a Federation representative named Mendoza and Leor representing the Caledonians. And of course, representing some folks named the Chrysalians. Sounds kind of made up to me, like some guy named Chris, like, I'm an alien, whatever. Anyway, their negotiator is someone referred to as a hired gun, Divinani Rawl, who just goes by Rawl, thank God. And this intrigues Troi. This feels like a very Party City level James Bond introduction. And yeah, I guess he's okay looking, but not nearly as good as the gaping void of the wormhole. And as you notice, he has a lady on his arm, and we never learn her name. And Rawl does the typical scumbag move and looks at Troi while the woman is right there as they look in the wormhole together, which the Barzans are selling because they don't have the resources to use the whole whatever that means. And somehow the Ferengi heard about this negotiation, and the anti-Semitic stereotype that is TNG era Ferengi just show up and insist on chairs so they can join. So this wormhole negotiation serves as a tie between the A and B plot, which is okay, aside from the Ferengi being the obvious conniving and scheming anti-Semitic stereotype they are at this point, even if they aren't as blindly and stupidly greedy, wearing fur and using laser whips on the last outpost. They're still in problematic space Jew territory, a trope which I'll link about below, but it's an issue within sci-fi to use anti-Semitic tropes to shorthandedly create alien species. I've mentioned this before, but Star Wars did this as well with Watto. Even if the Ferengi were meant to be interpreted as greedy-ass American capitalists, the characteristics they chose didn't immediately remind you of that. And maybe they could have improved upon that, have them wear like Wall Street business suits or really impractical and barely wearable haute couture runway looks. I think they're just such an ostentatious and completely ridiculous show of finery. No one's ever gonna wear inflatable pants, but I love that they exist. All that to say that what comes next is one of the most disturbing things I've seen on Star Trek, where Troi is in her office looking up Rawls' socials, and Rawls shows up at Troi's office unannounced during their recess and invites Troi to dinner. When Troi asks where the hell this traveling companion went.
What about your traveling companion?
My traveling companion is traveling. I sent her home.
He said she traveled in this really arrogant tone that he sent her home, which never gets cross-examined. Where the hell is this woman? Was that his wife? Like, what the fuck is he doing in there? I'd be like, I think I'm gonna give this woman a call before we're ever in a room alone together. How about that? Troi does kind of press him, but ever so gently, by saying, weren't you two getting along? And I'm definitely not trying to victim blame here. It should be known that from this point forward, Rawl turns a corner and begins the manipulation game, like the narcissist that he is, by giving a very aggressive response to a reasonable question about a woman that was hanging on him all but 5 minutes ago, and giving a pickup artist-like response.
Don't do that.
What?
Don't do Counselor Troi.
Was I?
Yeah, she might be putting up a professional wall because she's at her fucking job. And what I don't get is they even play like creepy music as Raul breaks distance, moves her chair, and puts his face inches from her face, beginning to interrogate her.
When you leave this office, who are you? Oh, so that's how it goes. You never do.
You can see that Troi's breath is beginning to hasten, and he even runs his finger up her arm. It's so fucking creepy. And he even takes out her hairband. All without consent, by the way. Like, this is completely fucked. And I don't agree with Memory Alpha that this is just awkward. This is clearly predatory behavior. Even if it is weird that he put her hand in the weave that probably took 5 hours to install and started messing with her hair, and he's shushing her as he's having his way, even if it's just with her hair, it's 5,000% fucking wrong. And then at that moment, he's like, oh, dinner at 8? Like, what was all that smashing her into submission emotionally and physically when she probably would have said yes without all of that weird shit? The Ferengi, meanwhile, are conspiring to take out the Federation negotiator Mendoza with some poison handshake stuff, which induces an allergic reaction that'll take him out, but definitely won't kill him. Like, it's disappointing that they do this, obviously, but it thickens the plot because Mendoza passes out in sickbay, and Riker has to replace him as the Federation negotiator.
You'll have to fill in, number one. Me? Well, I'm the designated host. It will be a most awkward transition. You're the next likely choice.
Meanwhile, in a confusing turn of events, Deanna is actually ready and looking forward to this date, even if he wastes no time at all being a total piece of shit, because he just kisses her. Wham! And she pulls away because she barely knows this guy, and he starts again with the insults.
Well, there she is again. Counselor Troi.
I'm not.
Negging and cutting her down. I don't understand what is romantic about this. And as was brought up in a conversation with a friend, would this be okay in the 24th century? Was this okay in the 80s? This definitely isn't okay now. Oh my God. What is meant to depict love or lust here? Because it just looks like Raul is inflicting her with emotional abuse, which makes her this helpless little lamb. When she says, I haven't been able to stop thinking about you all day, she sounds like a victim, not a woman in love, or even into this guy physically.
I haven't been able to stop thinking about you all day.
But I guess she is. I think even Marina Sirtis can't convincingly make Deanna Troi into this guy based on their interactions thus far. And I don't blame her at all, because they do it. They're adults, whatever. I get where she's coming from. Apparently, her having sex was what leaked about this episode in the preview, and the public was in an uproar about it. Never mind, Riker has had sex with God knows how many people, and no one cared. I'd rather see this done more realistically, where she says, Raul, look, you are grade A trash, but I've been on a ship with my ex for almost 3 years with no sex, so maybe this can work out, but no eye contact, no talking, you're not spending the night, and I never want to see you again. If you see me walking down the street, just walk the other way, please. Why does she have to be so smitten and in love? Like, why can't she just bang the guy and say, see you later? I hate this so much for her. Unsurprisingly, his arrogance carries over into the negotiation table, which is whatever. That's honestly forgivable. I don't really care about that. But being a narcissist, love-bombing cretin isn't. The next thing we see of Troi and Raul is Raul rubbing oil on her feet. You're giving the feet community a bad name, sir. God, are those really Marina's feet? I fucking hope not. Not that they're bad, I just don't want that for the actress, that's all. And again, he starts with the interrogations, which is disgusting.
What about Commander Ike?
Who have you been talking to?
No one. No one. I just sensed something when I saw the two of you together.
Will Riker and I are good friends.
Especially when he's so evasive about who he is. And we find out that, oh, he's actually a quarter betazoid, which makes him an empath. But that makes me confused. Let me get out a chart. Freaking fraggle fuck. Paper in the world when I don't need it. I don't know where to look when I do need it. God damn it. He's such an idiot. Wow, this is really bad. Okay. So his dad is like, huh? And his mom is a half beta Z. So he's like a quarter beta Z, you know, and Deanna is a half beta Z. So like she's twice the beta Z that he is. So does that mean that he's an empath? Or does that mean that he can just smell rotten milk through a closed refrigerator door? Because I'm inclined to think that it's the latter. Because I think this guy's just a mediocre piece of shit pickup artist. Who knows if even the Betazoid thing is accurate. Meanwhile, we get the only enjoyable part of this episode where Data joins Geordi in a shuttle to test the stability of the wormhole by going into it, with the Ferengi following them. But the wormhole ends up in the wrong spot, and they end up in the Delta Quadrant instead of the Gamma Quadrant. And Geordi's like, hey, this wormhole is more unstable than we realized. My visor shows that it's about to show up again, so we better motor like right now if we're gonna make it back to the Alpha Quadrant.
I'm telling you, it's changing. I can see it with my visor.
I have no intention of leaving yet. We have not finished taking our readings. Ferengi pod out.
Damn it, Arador! We're 70,000 light years away from our ships. Come on now!
But the Ferengi refuse because they think Geordi's lying. But he definitely wasn't, and the Ferengi gets stuck in the Delta Quadrant just like that in a little shuttle. And I thought that was just so funny. Ugh. And these guys actually show up in a Voyager episode later on called The False Prophets. So that's nice that they're not completely forgotten. But get out your puke buckets because the worst of the worst is coming right up, which sucks because I like the idea of Beverly and Troi developing a close friendship. We don't get to see them alone together too often. But with this, they don't just flunk the fuck out of the Bechdel test by having Troi crazily gush about a guy she met like 2 days ago to one of the only other named women characters on the show. They're stretching in spandex in front of a room full of mirrors. You can see everything.
I feel completely out of control. Happy, terrified. But there's nothing rational about this. Who needs rational when your toes curl up? I'm afraid I'm going to lose myself.
One guy reviewer even criticized this by saying that even though it's meant to be sexy, Troi is technically wearing that more than she normally does. God, men are just so fucking exhausting, you guys. What I don't understand is Rawls' ability to read emotion and be empathetic, or is it to control someone's mind? Because I'll be honest, fellas, this just sounds like men thinking this is how women talk. I know this is a shock, but feminine or feminine looking people have other things on our mind, particularly right now when we live in a disease and bullet-ridden melting hellhole. Wiener in this brand of trash bag attached really isn't that important. And it's not like he's a Mendelbrot fractal just endlessly confounding and fascinating. The guy writers here are just showing how completely obtuse and egotistical they are. But Marina and Gates McFadden power through this crap. And both, I think, are owed a huge apology for that. Like, how fucking dare they make them do this for a paycheck? I absolutely hate it. Almost as much as I hate those pokey forks that Troi and Raul eat with later, even if Raul eats like an empty forkful. And Troi takes notice of him using his Betazoid ability to get the upper hand in negotiations and confronts him about it. And he counters with, well, you use your abilities on the bridge for the captain, same as I do, so maybe you should examine your own ethics. Nope, sorry, not the same thing. Her abilities are to give Picard insight, because emotional labor by women for men is just so goddamn typical, isn't it? His empathic abilities are to give himself insight and gain the upper hand in a situation in a way he never discloses. So this false equivalency is garbage. So he and the Ferengi conspire to create a conflict between the Enterprise and the Ferengi so he could swoop in and reassure the wormhole owner that the Chrysalians are the best buyers because they're so peaceful, and Deanna outs his ass as a lying, conspiring Betazoid.
Pardon me, Captain, I believe there's a slight conflict of interest here.
I agree, entirely. Mr. Rahl asked me not to tell anyone he has empathic powers, which he uses to manipulate his competitors in a negotiation.
So he's toast. Geordi and Data come back and say that, hey, the wormhole is really unstable and therefore worthless, so that deal is toast. And sure, you could say that when Raul makes a move to beg Deanna to leave the Enterprise, that she tells him to fuck off. In that way, she's showing agency, but it's hard to find that satisfying when she's fallen in love with a narcissist as the result of his love bombing and negging. The normalization of that kind of pickup artist behavior at a time where trans, intersex, and women's bodies are constantly under threat of being coerced, controlled, policed. Topped off with a reminder of the anti-Semitic Ferengi makes this episode extremely distasteful. Season 3 is a massive improvement, but this is a completely skippable, giant mistake right in the middle of it. Like, subscribe, no pressure, but peer pressure. Till next time, I guess.